Brian Jeffiers is my next guest. Of course, Brian is UK Extension Agent down in Johnson County. Welcome to Saturday Report.
Good to be here, John.
You got your, how many times you been swimming so far this week?
Well, not any yet, but my 5-year-old is ready to open the pool. Cindy looked out there and said, I want to go swim, Daddy. It's not quite.
It is unbelievable. I know you're talking about frost seeding. I like 32 degrees or less, you know. Yeah. But this weather conditions are just unbelievable. I mean, hopefully it's a positive benefit to farmers rather than a takeaway. But I know John David Johnson and a couple other agents, Jeff Moore, had a chance to talk in the last several months about frost seeding, and you can't talk about it too much. That's extremely important. One aspect of farming that a lot of people should, take advantage of. Take us through a little bit about frost seeding and how important that is. And can you frost seed pasture as well as hay fields? That's my big question.
Yeah, and we think about it a lot with pastures, mainly because of the traffic and the selective grazing. The stand can kind of get thinned out. You can lose a lot of your clover out of there, and so you reach a point where you're getting a little too heavily into grass. You may be calling for a little bit more nitrogen fertilizer, and frost seeding, getting that legume stand up a little bit can save you a ton of money on fertilizer.
Because we talk about legumes, that's nitrogen. That's the most expensive part of fertilizer.
And that's the part that you're having to do every year. Your phosphorus and potash will carry over, but your nitrogen either gets used, gets gassed out, or leached out, and it's gone. So if you can get some legume in there, it can be worth 50 to 200 pounds of actual nitrogen per acre, and you don't have to go to the farm store to figure out how much that's going to save you. It's a ton of money, so it's well worth it. And yeah, we're kind of looking at some funny weather. This is a tough year to pretend that frost seeding is a big deal, but looking at our area and the weather history, we have a 50% frost date of about May the 4th, right around Derby Day. We can still have another frost after that. So looking at the days between now and then, there's still plenty of time potentially to get some freezes, especially in this first half of March as it comes up. So I think frost seeding is still on the table for a lot of people, still an option for a lot of pastures.
I guess one of the questions that I've got, we talk about frost seeding. The ground could be absolutely wet, not frozen at all. What kind of damage do we do when we're out there with the machinery, and how do we reduce that damage by getting our equipment in on the land?
Yeah, it's tough, and this is the time of year when pastures just get destroyed because the cattle are out there, and we talked about feeding last time when I was on here and trying to move the cattle around, feed in different places and spread that damage out. So you've really got to get down to a drier point, and I hope we've got a little bit of drying out coming ahead, but the potential for some flooding rain still seems to be ahead over the next couple of weeks maybe. So it's got to dry out some, or you've got to at least use the lightest possible tractor you can get out there with if you've really got an issue with your stand that you want to get out there and broadcast.
And would I be correct in saying that maybe the later that you frost seed, and I don't know, but it seems like there'd be less moisture in the ground. As we go along towards spring and towards summer, we get into that April where there may not be, who knows, may not be as much moisture in the ground. It could be sopping.
It's hard to say. It really is. But yeah, obviously we want to get that moisture. Now, the nice thing about the moisture is that it does create that freeze, that heaving and thawing that we need with freezing. And I've got a photo that I sent in here with a freeze thaw. You can see some good frozen ground, and you see that texture that's there where the soil freezes and creates some almost like little fingers of soil that stick up and makes the ground sort of bristly so that those seeds can find some place to make some contact. And that's what it's all about. Seed to soil contact is the big thing with frost seeding. You've got to get that done right or you're just not going to have good success.
Now, when we talk about frost seeding, we got the situation, we got the heaving of the soil a little bit. That kind of helps getting those seed particles in the ground.
Right, and that's what it's all about. Is because if we're going to go with bare ground, you can use an implement like a cultipacker. You get a prepared seed bed, you broadcast it on there, you run the cultipacker over that, get really good seed to soil contact and get it mashed in there good. Can't do that on an existing stand. So you've really got to eliminate competition for one thing, and that goes back to the fall. Grazing it as late as you possibly can into the late fall, early winter, and get that excess cover off. When you got those really heavy layers of grass and so forth, the seed's not going to find the soil. If it doesn't find the soil, it's not going to germinate. So last fall, if you really did get those grazed down tight, you've got a good potential for some frost seeding this early spring and late winter.
Talk about varieties. What type of frost seeding? You talk about legumes. What different legumes can we frost seed? Doesn't necessarily have to be just clovers, does it?
No, that's a good choice in our area, and UK's got a lot of research on that with variety trials and so forth. Red clover and white clover do well now. Some of the other clovers not so good. They don't have the productivity that you need to get out there and compete with grasses, because as spring comes along, that grass is really going to fight to the forefront, and the clover needs a little help to have a chance. So if it doesn't yield well, it's not going to keep up. But the red clover and white clover both do well. And other parts of the world, they sort of look down their nose at Lespedeza, but there's no question that in our area of the world.
That's what I was thinking about.
Right.
Birdfoot trefoil, Lespedeza.
Right. The poor soils, when you're talking about the reclaimed strip jobs in some of these areas where a lot of our cattle production takes place over here, Lespedeza has really been a godsend. It's a great forage that will produce well on some fair to midland soils at best, and get us some vegetative matter out there for not just improving the soil, but also to feed the livestock as well.
What type of soil conditions do we need to have to initiate this? What does the soil have to have in it that would make frost seeding very productive and successful?
And that's where we get back into the fall again. And we hope that you've run your soil samples in the fall, gotten those results back. There's time to get them back, but there's not much time to make adjustments, especially in the area of pH. If your pH is too high, you don't have time to correct that before it would be time to get a frost seeding done. So if you've run that, if you've done your lime application last fall, you've gotten some time for that soil to react to that and get the pH back where it needs to be, then you're in a good spot as far as getting the frost seeding done.
I'm thinking, how many people in West Virginia have a concern about their pH being too high? Not very many. And maybe where you are, there's a limestone base.
Not so much.
Right. Not so much, but it's not. Normally, our problem is not having enough high pH, and what it needs to be, 6.5 to 7 for legumes. And we're lucky if we can keep it at.
We're lucky
6
to get it in the 6s at all as a stretch. I've had results that have come in over the years calling for 5 tons to the acre of lime, and some really, really poor stuff. Some of that is the commercial fertilizer. A lot of people think, well, if a little is good, a lot is better. But we always want to pinpoint that and really apply fertilizer based on what the soil actually needs. But that's just the reality of the mine spoil and some of the residue that's in there. Really keeps that pH low, keeps it really sour.
I'll tell you what, let's take a break. And when I come back, I want you to answer this. Once you get it seeded, how do you take care of that? When do you start grazing? When do you not start grazing? If it happens to be in a hayfield, for instance, what's the management there is what I want to ask.
All right.
So we'll have Brian answer that when we come back right after this minute.